name is Evananda. I've been teaching yoga around the world for over 30 years, sharing my blessings by offering free yoga classes, currently on the most beautiful beach in America, here in Siesta Key, Florida. Furthering my collaboration to raise personal and planetary consciousness, I now present Beyond the Matrix, a program in which I have thought-provoking conversations with authors, scholars, teachers, and healers who are on the cutting edge of ideas which will inspire, educate, and open our hearts to the multiple ways we can transform our world.
My name is Evananda, and welcome to Beyond the Matrix, the show that explores the mysteries of life and empowers you with knowledge concerning your world and your being. SBNvideo.tv is your free thinking zone and the place to go for all things spiritual. This evening, we will be discussing sacred sex. It is very important that the tremendous energy that gives mankind the ability to create be used efficiently, because it is connected to the same energetic force that sustains the individual's own reality and vitality. It is well known that this intimate energy is related to the health of our psyche and our physical bodies, as Freud clearly demonstrated. Not only is this energy necessary for sustaining physical vitality, and thus the 5 senses, but also the 7 superior senses, the chakras that unite mankind with the divine. In our sexually obsessed culture, we are given amazingly little information about how to deal with sexuality in a truly healthy way. Our media, advertising, and entertainment industries are filled with subtle and not so subtle messages about sex. The underlying thrust is all about beauty, sexual desire, and how important it is to buy the products which will make us popular, more attractive, more sexy. Rarely do any of these sexual messages even hint at the spiritual dimensions that can be reached through sex. Those of us who have been hypnotized by all these subliminal and overt messages, sacred sexuality might even seem like a contradiction in terms. It's hard for us to even imagine that sex might actually be considered a sacred act to be honored. Our traditional religions don't tend to recognize sexuality as a means to divine awareness. As a result, many people experience a split between sexuality and spirituality in their lives. This split between spirituality and sexuality creates a deep psychic schism, which often prohibits enduring, loving relationships to form. The rift may be caused by cultural, religious, and early programming that plants seeds deep in the unconscious, which makes merging of sexual and spiritual aspects of our being too difficult without specific healing and counseling. Therefore, my guest this evening is Dianna Daffner. Dianna is a personal coach and a teacher in the fields of relationship, sacred sexuality, and energy awareness, and is a member of the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. She holds a master's in counseling, and with her husband, Richard, is the author of Tantric Sex for Busy Couples: How to Deepen Your Passion in Just 10 Minutes a Day. The Daffners lead romantic intimacy retreats for couples in Florida and other locations, including upcoming journey to Mexico. They are the creators of a movement program for couples called Tantra Tai Chi. Dianna has taught Tai Chi, Aikido, Reiki, massage, energy awareness, and meditation, and is featured in the book Women in Aikido. Her passion has always been to help people connect deeply with the inner experience of love. Welcome to the program, Dianna.
Hi, Evananda. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, this is a very deep subject, no doubt. But let's begin. The title of our program today is Sacred Sex. So would you give us your definition of what sacred sex is?
Well, sacred sex, sacred sexuality, you know, the first thing that comes to mind when we say those words together are you, Evananda, in your yoga classes, when you say every part of the body is sacred. When you invite us to feel and to be present in our bodies. And so certainly sexual energy and our sexual anatomy is all part of that sacredness. So at some level, everything about us is sacred. You know, we could say that eating is sacred, that anything we do. But sexually speaking, the word sex itself almost needs to be defined first of all.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, what is sex?
What is sex? And in Eastern traditions, sexual energy is the source of all energy. All life force is considered to be originally sexual energy.
So in a sense, our conversation, our energy together could have an element of that sexuality to it.
Yes, it's the primal creative force.
It is.
Yes.
And in Tantra, can I explain a bit about Tantra?
Absolutely, if you'd like to.
The word Tantra, T-A-N-T-R-A, is a Sanskrit word from ancient India. Sanskrit is the holy language, the sacred language of India. Some feel it might be the original language of all humankind. You know,
yes. There's a little debate about that, but
right.
Yes,
they're trying to find out. You know, how did we start?
Yes.
Maybe they'll find it on Mars. I don't know. Anyway, how did language begin? But if I weren't in the field I'm in, I might have been in a language field. I love words.
Equivalent.
So yeah. So sex is used. The word sex is a funny little word. You know, it's a short little word. It has a lot of different meanings. It's used to define gender. You know, what sex are you? Male, female, other. You know, in today's world, we're learning that we're not actually, all of us, every baby, every child is not born obviously male or female, which is another topic for conversation that's quite beyond the matrix, but that's not our topic. So sex is often used just to describe gender or to refer to our body parts. Don't touch my sex, you know, don't let anyone touch you in your sex, as if we have a body part.
That sexuality is confined to the genitals, you're saying.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And then it's used as to describe an activity. You know, did you have sex with that woman? You know, and so whatever our politics, when Bill Clinton said, you know, it depends what you mean by sex. You know, did you have sex with that woman? And out of that trial came the idea that oral sex was not sex, which is very damaging, actually. Regardless of how you may or may not feel about Bill Clinton, it was actually very damaging because sexual activity, as you're starting here, is such a powerful force, and it engages not just our genitals, and it engages not just our body, but our emotions, our thoughts, our soul, and it engages us. And from that belief that oral sex is not sex, a lot of young women, young girls actually, felt that they could perform oral sex on boys, and they weren't having sex.
Yes.
But they were.
Yes.
And so they were getting all of the other pieces of it, and then when it was over, or when they were rejected, having all of the same problems that they would have if they had actually been having intercourse. So a lot of people think that sex equals intercourse, and it doesn't. There's many items on the menu for sexual connection and sexual activity between people, or even with oneself, obviously. So describing sex itself is a challenge, and yet we can, for the purposes of today's conversation, we're talking about both sexual energy and we're talking about the activity of sexual interplay between people.
In esoteric schools, Kundalini yoga is a process by which one raises the energy that is at the base of the spine,
which is pretty close to our sexual
organ area.
Right?
So it is fundamentally sexual.
Fundamentally sexual. Absolutely.
But to raise the energy in order to come up into higher plateaus of feeling, of divinity, of connecting with the spiritual aspects of that energy. It is taught that you can't do that unless you purify yourself on an ethical level.
And that may all well be true for a certain purist, point of view. The work that we do, so Tantra, getting back to what Tantra is, so Tantra, Kundalini comes from Tantra. Tantra describes a variety of teachings that invite us to explore our connection with the divine. In a way that doesn't isolate us from it, in a way that says the divine energy lives within us.
Yes, it's using the energy that is the most potent energy in the universe, actually, because they say that the same energy that drives sex also drives the entire universe.
Holds the planets together. I don't know. There's this huge force, and we have access to that.
When we have access to it.
Through all of our senses. Tantra as a spiritual training is very different from many other spiritual trainings, because it embraces our senses. It embraces our life.
Sexuality.
And in that, embraces sexuality.
Have you heard of the black tantra, gray tantra, and white tantra?
There are divisions in Tantra, just as there are in any spiritual or religious or philosophical school. My background is primarily, my training actually is in martial arts, and in my martial art is called Aikido. And within Aikido is a Japanese martial art, and the word itself has the word love in it. Ai is the Japanese word for love. It's the kanji, the picture. And ki is chi, energy, life force, the vitality of sexual
energy that we're talking about.
So Aikido, do simply means the way. Do in Japanese is like Tao, the way. So it's the way of harmony and love with universal energy. It's a beautiful name, right? Well, wouldn't you know it, even within Aikido, there's separate divisions. There's this kind and that kind, and they don't all get along. And I just learned even that Quakers have divisions, and they don't all get along. So, yes, there are differences, but I'm not really qualified to talk about the tantric divisions because that's not really my specialty. What's exciting to me about Tantra is not so much that it's a spiritual training in and of itself, which it is. And in its purity, it has nothing to do with what I teach. In its purity, it has nothing to do with relationship between two people. It has nothing to do with love and sexuality as a bonding between a couple. And yet, some of the principles from tantric teachings can be applied. And that was what was exciting in the 20th century when Tantra re-emerged. It's really thousands of years old, but it was buried. A training, a spiritual teaching.
It was dangerous, actually.
It was considered dangerous.
Because it's the sexual energy.
And it brought up a lot of energy. I have read, again, it's hard to know what's true about thousands of years ago. It's hard to know what's true about yesterday's political statement, but that Hatha Yoga that you teach, the Hatha Yoga, actually really came about as a way of opening and training the body to allow it to to process the sexual energy.
I think all esoteric schools
Yeah.
ultimately are based on exactly the same thing. And so there's when you really dig deep into all of them, you find exactly the same thing. The same, our humanness. We cannot escape our humanness, and our sexuality is what is, I believe, what is the fundamental energy that gives us life and creates life. And so it is also, most religions have steered away from it because it's so potent that to deal with it directly, to manipulate it directly, is too dangerous. The pleasure principle, as you were saying, is too magnetizing and distracting, because, and I was going to ask you about that, because in Tantra, the idea is to conserve the orgasm, not to release it.
Right.
So, in what you do, is it to conserve the orgasm or to enhance it?
Combination. Okay, so what Tantra went underground, and as you say, some people felt it was dangerous. It certainly threatened the matrix. It certainly threatened the
because of the enormous
powers that would be, and also because they were open to things that they were told they shouldn't be open to, and maybe eating meat or drinking wine and some different things. But in the 20th century, when Tantra re-emerged, when we in the West became enamored and interested in many of these different esoteric teachings, we're very fortunate because some of the people who began studying and learning about it also were therapy oriented and were interested and noticed how useful this teaching could be in relationships. And although some people feel that it's gotten kind of watered down as it's applied to relationships, the truth is it's kind of emerging into a whole new powerful experience for couples. And I will get back to the orgasm and the conserving thing. So what Richard and I, my husband and I had heard about Tantra years before I met Richard. I was very involved in my meditation work and studying Aikido and very also esoteric kinds of things that in my meditation studies. Consciousness. I was really exploring consciousness. And I heard about Tantra, and but it didn't draw me at the time. I knew a little bit about it, but I wasn't drawn to it. Once I was with Richard, I began to, and we married, our sexual times together began to lose some of that original power that when you're first in a relationship, sexuality seems to have. Okay, yes. And this happens to a lot of couples. I mean, some don't have it at the beginning, but for many, when you're first dating, when you're courting, our bodies are flooded with hormones that turn us on more. And so we're very into love making, and really it's about love. It's about making love. It's not, and really cherishing the other person, and there's a lot more of that going on. Once a relationship takes hold, and you are faced with dirty diapers and mortgages and decisions about cars and health and vacations and all the things of life, that sexual energy gets very scattered and no longer focused, and I think people fall down a spiral a bit to it being less interesting for them.
Yes.
And sometimes eventually less happening at all. Mm-hmm. And so in a bit that was happening to us. Mm-hmm. And I said, maybe we should look into Tantra and see what there is about it. And we were fortunate because there were just recently some new books had come out and people were starting to teach about it. And I started studying, and I said, Tantra and the teachings that go with it are about energy awareness. Mm-hmm. That's my field. Mm-hmm. I've been doing energy awareness through Aikido for many years and meditation, and it's like, wow, this is applying energy awareness to that sexual energy. So when you're talking about Kundalini, being aware of the energy and helping it to notice it rising, it's really very similar.
Yes.
And of course, because it was around sexuality, Richard was interested, whereas the esoteric studies he was okay with them, but he wasn't spending much time. He wasn't a meditator. This attracted him, and we began to focus on it. And we were, at the time, we got into a Tai Chi program that we learned called Tai Chi Cha. It's a very easy movement format for balancing chi and energy and shifting awareness into the moment, into the now. Because when we shift into the now, when we step into the trueness of the moment, that's when we have access to the infinite. That's when we have access to the divine.
Yeah. And that's what's so beautiful about sex, is that it absolutely pulls you into the moment, because nothing else is as powerful an energy as sexuality is. And so it makes you aware of the moment.
It only does that when it's at its very peak kind of moments, because you can be making love, engage in sexual activity with someone who maybe you even care for them greatly, and maybe you're really enjoying yourself, but you can also be thinking about something else at the same time and not really be there.
Yes.
And you can be.
So there are certainly different levels of it.
Exactly.
But it's all. It's all in the mind.
Exactly, the mind is very important. Tantra gives us a way of looking at three levels of sexuality that I'd like to share with you. And
sure, please.
It's based on what they call gunas, G-U-N-A. And guna is like a quality of life. So one of the gunas would be tamas, T-A-M-A, like tamasic. So tamasic, a tamasic quality is very earthy. In food it might be meat and potatoes. Okay, it's very of the earth. It's not necessarily bad, but it's organic. It's we are organic. We are of the earth. So that's tamasic. Now, sexually,
and that purely physical.
Very physical.
Yeah.
And so Temasek sexuality is very physical, and it kind of encompasses everything from the horrific, painful, dangerous, harmful abuse and incest and unwanted sex and rape.
Sex without ethic.
Sex without ethic would be the lowest form of Temasek, but actually it extends into boring sex. I think just sex that's kind of maybe for
indifferent sex,
boring. Maybe maybe he's getting off. Maybe she's tolerating it. Maybe it's just not really. It's not ethically bad, but it's not particularly fun, and all of that kind of comes into what I would consider Temasek. And unfortunately, that's probably the most common.
Which is really quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the problems, as you were saying, when you meet someone, the sexual energy is very strong because you don't know that person. And not knowing the person, you're excited by them revealing themselves to you. That revelation, that finding out about the other person. But if it is that kind of sex where it's purely material, that is purely genital, then it becomes boring rather quickly.
Right. So what you're describing, and you can see it in your face when you talk about it, the excitement of something new, that probably is more of a guna that they call rajasic, so R-A-G-A. Now, rajasic is in food would be more like curry. Sort of hot and spicy when I think of rajasic. Yeah. So in the beginning of a relationship, there might be some rajasicness to it. I think of that as kind of Hollywood sex, what we see in the movies.
Yeah.
And
you're excited by the image.
You're excited by the image. You're excited, or by the person. There can be
or
love.
Their initial chemistry. Yes.
There even can be love in the Temasek, but it's a dutiful love more. The Temasek would be more dutiful, or there's connection and devotion, but it's not particularly alive. And in the Rajasic, there's a lot of life and there's
but it's short-lived.
It can be short-lived, and it's but it's what people crave. So people think.
But why do they crave that?
Why do they crave that?
Why do they crave
they perhaps because it excites them and it nourishes them. It awakens that powerful sexual energy, but they don't know what it is or what to do with it. Perhaps. What would you say? What were you thinking?
Well, what I was thinking is that the reason, perhaps, that people are addicted to that, and often which is what can lead to infidelity or serial relationships, is due to the fact that they are unwilling or unable to reveal the deeper part of themselves, unable to use that or to feel that sexual energy in their heart.
There might be heart, but you're right. It's not a soft loving. It's kind of a yang. If you go into the yin and the yang, or yin and yang, it's kind of a yang, very active, very busy. It's the kind of sex, Rajasic sex, is the kind of sex they refer to when they're talking about how many calories you burn. Mm-hmm. Okay, you burn a lot of calories. Yeah. It's about pleasuring each other. It's about, so there can be, within that, yes, there can be infidelity. There can be the excitement of the illicit. Anything that furnishes excitement could fall under that Rajasic, and it can't really sustain itself on its own because it's not necessarily touching the soul.
Right, it's not touching the soul.
Yeah.
It's
but
not
it's hot
touching
and
the
spicy.
heart. Well, certainly, and it's the most common form of sexuality.
Well, no, actually, I think Temasek is more common. I think it's the most. I think people want Rajasic. I think maybe you're right. I mean, maybe it's common. Maybe they're both really common. But in the clubs,
I see them the same thing.
Right, you see them the same. Yeah, I think that Rajasic. They want Rajasic. They might end up with Temasek. But then there's a third level, which is the least populated in terms of how many people go there. And that's the realm that the tantric realm falls into.
Exactly.
And the word for that is sattvic. And the word sattvic is kind of what you were using earlier. Actually means purity. Mm-hmm. In food, it would be more, vegan, vegetarian, raw food.
It doesn't sound exciting
to
a lot of people.
It doesn't sound exciting,
but that's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And because it's more of a void, you're opening into somewhere where you're not relying on the chandelier to get you jumping. I don't know why I think about hanging from a chandelier, but anyway, that's my image of Rajasic. But so the sattvic, or I use tantric and sattvic almost synonymously in terms of sexuality, is a sexual connection, a sexual experience that is heart-based, and when the sex and the heart are joined, there's an opening of the mind, there's an opening of the spirit.
And I think that type of sexuality is even more intense. I know that it's been described as sort of a milder, gentler form of, but absolutely not.
No, it's
that what people are missing in their sexuality, I believe, is that connectedness on a multitude of levels, instead of simply a physical level. When you can take it into a place of deeper feeling and appreciation for the other person's multifacetedness, that's when I think that sexuality becomes extremely intense.
Very intense. And so what Richard and I discovered as we began exploring the experience of raising sexual energy from the realm of the genitals, not removing it from
the
there.
First three chakras, which is where it usually circulates.
We're not removing it from there, but I like to think of it extending it, expanding it to the heart. When we connected the sex and the heart, we found that we kept opening to this other realm. Okay, we actually gave a name to that realm. We call it Bindi. Bindi is the dot that Indian women wear. And in our book, we describe how we work with the sex and the heart and the Bindi. And one of the ways we work with it is we created a movement program for couples based on the Tai Chi that we were practicing, the Tai Chi Cha. It transformed, it evolved into something that we now call Tantra Tai Chi. And instead of, Tantra and Tai Chi, both thousands of years old, were originally practices done by individuals. They had nothing to do with bettering a relationship. They're spiritual trainings. Tai Chi is both physical and spiritual, and in a sense, so is Tantra. And what we've done is said, hey, the principles of these ancient teachings can be applied, if we apply them to our connection with our partner, we can transform our experience in the bedroom to be no longer tamasic and not just rajasic, but actually in this realm of opening to spirit, sattvic. and it transforms our entire relationship and our life as well. And we found that we can teach couples how to get there, because originally it feels like you get there by accident, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's like suddenly the stars are right, the moon is full, you're on the beach, and suddenly you fall into each other's arms, and it's an exquisite, transcendent sexual moment. Well, that doesn't happen with the dirty diapers and the mortgage and the cars and all the things in our life. So we said, hey, learn this program that we call Tantra Tai Chi, and then you can apply the principles of that, which is very similar to Kundalini work.
No. It's exact. You know, what that reminded me of is that in ancient times, couples would, at a certain time of the moon, go away and be instructed how to achieve this higher type of sexuality between them. And that's where the word honeymoon, the whole concept of a honeymoon, comes from. So they go away in order to be counseled by teachers as to how to use their sexual energy and to unite them in a loving, bonded relationship, and to bring that energy into areas that it doesn't come absolutely naturally. And in these places, they learn to venerate one another, to adore each other, to appreciate each other at the deepest level.
That's so beautiful. It really is beautiful. And that is what we share with them. And coming to an intimacy retreat is like that. Going on a honeymoon.
And what better honeymoon would that be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those teachers in those days were the priestesses. And they were sacred ministries. That do
they
this.
went to the temples to learn to have sex in the proper way.
Right.
And we've lost that tradition. Sex now in churches are really not even discussed.
Right, no, it's a no-no. I mean, I'm not sure that tradition was ever widespread, in any culture. But whoever we are today on the earth, wherever we are on this planet today, the problems that couples have that they run into in their relationships are the same everywhere, where what might have touched on the spiritual in the very beginning, might have had a bunch of that spiciness, has kind of descended into performance-oriented and mechanical and not going anywhere. And
no wonder it gets boring.
It is boring, especially, of course, for women. So this is where Richard and I were.
And that's why people try to find multiple partners.
Exactly.
In order to enrich themselves with some sort of, excitement that they can't get from that one partner.
So you were talking about conserving
the orgasm.
It's not now. Let's talk about orgasm for a moment.
Absolutely.
I like to use the word orgasm to describe the experience of opening, the feel-good experience, that wondrous moment of the French call it the le petit mort, the little death. That moment when who you are kind of disappears and you open to the greater source of everything. Okay, a lot of people think that orgasm is the same as ejaculation.
It's not,
and it's not. So by separating those, it's not withholding us from the experience of orgasmic openness and joy and spiritual wow, but we do encourage and teach how to voluntarily, intentionally have actually non-ejaculatory intercourse, which is a very profound experience.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And that actually has come up in, before Tantra had its rebirth in the late 20th century. Earlier,
particularly our generation.
Right. Earlier, there have been times in Europe where they've and in America where different schools have arisen to try to teach without they didn't talk about Tantra per se, but they had on their own maybe discovered this kind of lovemaking. And you mentioned,
it's beautifully mentioned.
And you mentioned when we were talking earlier that when you think of tantric sex, you think of long, extended lovemaking, because allowing time for that to build.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. That is traditionally how it is. And our book title It's Tantric
Yes,
Sex for Busy
a
Couples.
contradiction to that.
How to deepen your passion in just 10 minutes a day,
Yes.
because we don't have time in our current busy lives to set aside hours a day.
We have 6 hours a day to watch television.
Yeah, we do. We could find the time, perhaps.
I think
so. But we have to have a willing partner who is also going to be willing to do that, and we don't always have that interest or that training. And what Rich and I have found is that the Tantra Tai Chi pattern that we give people to be really present with their energy, in their body, bringing themselves into the heart and into their soul in the moment, actually can speed up this process so that they can enter into it for short periods of time with incredible joy. Now, not all of our home play assignments are so short. At our workshops, we do these intimacy retreats.
Yes.
Okay, they're workshops. And we don't have sex at the workshops. It's not, we don't teach hands-on, priestess-wise honeymoon version. But we do give room and space for people to go back to their rooms. We often will be teaching at a hotel, and so they'll go back to their hotel room or wherever they're staying and give them assignments. And those assignments are typically at least an hour long because they do want to spend that time together. And those are sexual and those are naked assignments, unlike what we do at the course, at the workshop sessions. We are clothed and we are doing the Tantra Tai Chi and many other kinds of practices.
Techniques.
In a sense, it's a technique, it's a tool, but we also work with communication and being able to express your desire, which is very important. You know, how do we move things if we don't know even that we want to move things? So we have to learn how to do that. And so we give couples some wonderful practices to do at the workshops. And at our workshops, there's not a lot of group dynamic. The couples work, in dyads, the two of them work together. And most of our workshops are not focused. Most of our workshops are not focused on what's wrong in a relationship. They're mostly focused on, let's all assume that we know about Temasek Sex. We've all had some experience there. Maybe we've touched on Rajasic, and maybe they're coming there thinking that it's going to be Rajasic, but we teach them about the Sattvic or the Tantric sex because we're interested in a couple experiencing those intimate moments together, those moments of exquisite, in the moment joy, the same kind of feeling that they had when they maybe chose to accept a marriage proposal or stood before an altar, or those moments of openness and
deep love.
Deep love, and our whole workshop is designed to foster that. This was not the original title of my book, Tantric Sex for Busy Couples: How to Deepen Your Passion in Just 10 Minutes a Day. Was not my original title.
What was your original title?
My original title was Ceremonies for Love: How to Create Intimacy in Your Relationship. It's a different focus. Ceremonies for Love: How to Create Intimacy.
But I can see how it wouldn't be as commercial.
Well, that's what the publisher. I was happy that I had a publisher who was interested, and he liked the book, was happy with the Tantra Tai Chi, was happy with the description of sexual practices, which are very ceremonial. I mean, that's the thing about Tantra. When people say, what is Tantric Sex? It's like, we could say it's a gourmet version of lovemaking, but it's really being intentional and bringing somewhat ritual and ceremony, and making it sacred by declaring it sacred.
Yes. And knowing at that point that what your intention will be for a given amount of time will be to devote your attention to the other person. And attention and love are very similar.
Exactly.
You cannot love something that you do not want to pay attention to. I'd like to, if I could. There's a little quote from Osho. Do you know Osho? He's a guru who spoke about sex very often in his teachings.
He's probably the most prominent Indian guru who brought Tantra into the Western world.
I believe so.
Yeah.
He says, in deep orgasm, if you are aware, you will know for the first time what ecstasy is. Otherwise, you have only heard the word. You have not known its meaning. Only in deep orgasm, if you are aware, if your flame of awareness is burning bright, will you be able to know that sex is not just sex. Sex is the outermost layer. Deep inside is love. And even deeper is prayer. And deepest is God Himself. Sex can become a cosmic experience. Then it is Tantra. Sex plus awareness, and something tremendous starts happening.
It's beautiful. That's beautifully phrased. I mean, he was a wondrous writer.
He was.
Richard actually met him. He didn't study with him, but
where in Oregon?
No, in
India.
In India.
In India.
And
in
I
Pune.
think it might have been his 50th birthday party or something. Rajneesh. He was Rajneesh then.
He was Rajneesh.
Became
yes.
Osho after he passed away. And Richard feels he was actually blessed by him, received Shaktipat, had a spiritual experience. Even though he did not study with him, he was just there, traveling, and something brought him there. So these many years later, here Richard is teaching with me, and Richard says in the book, even he talks about his experience and how we got going on this, because I'm the one who said, our lovemaking can be better than this. I didn't yet have the vocabulary of Temasek and Rajasic and Sattvic, but
it helps.
I had had lovers
understand.
before, and I had had awareness before because of my Aikido training. And Aikido and my meditation training was so much about energy awareness that anything less than that was difficult for me. And I had been away from it. And Richard had experience with Aikido, but he wasn't an Aikidoist and wasn't a meditator. So here we were, and I said, he wasn't. We'd been married for a little bit at this point, and he said he wasn't. He knew our sex life could be better. He knew it could be better, but he was generally satisfied.
Yes.
Because men can be satisfied quite easily with the getting off part, and so he would have his getting off, and maybe it wasn't the best, most romantic or most meaningful experience, but it was enough to get him going for the day and go off to work. And now it's a whole different world, of course, but he said to me, you're probably right when I explained what I wanted, and he said, you're probably right, but you'll have to take us there, because I was the one who had this drive to make something different, and he didn't have the knowledge or the tools,
but at least he was a willing participant.
He was and that's why at our workshops I have such love and such respect for the couples who come to our retreats, because often it's one person who sees our website, intimacyretreats.com, and they read some of my writings or they read some of the things, and they know right away this is something they want in their relationship, and they talk to their partner, and their partner is like, you want me to go to a workshop about sex? What's the matter with our sex life? Their partner doesn't necessarily get it, but they're willing. Those who do show up, they often, they come because they love their partner enough to come, and they think they're coming just to sort of tolerate their, that, and then they get so much out of it. A little similar, there's a new movie that just came out.
Oh, yes,
called
you mentioned
Hope
that before.
Springs.
Hope Springs, yes.
Hope Springs is...
And it's about what you do.
No, and
okay.
Yes. It's about sex. It's not about tantric or spiritual...
No, it's purely about sex.
It doesn't go to that level, but it's about a couple who have lost their connection, seriously lost it, but they're living their lives as if they're a couple. They've been married for decades, and she she's the one. She believes there's something else. Actually, they show a scene where she's in Barnes & Noble. I was hoping they would show a copy of our book. But instead, she finds another book, and she books them for a, they say it's a retreat, but it's a private sessions, a private retreat, which we also do private work, private sessions.
Oh, you do? Excellent.
But with Stephen Carell, who is the therapist,
yes.
right?
All right.
And so they go away to this very expensive thing, and he goes kicking and screaming. Mm-hmm. He is not into this at all. I'm not going to give away the movie, but the therapist does invite them to take a look at the fact that they are not having sex, and tries to give them ways to start touching each other again. And although they don't take it, it's not clear that they won't end up having, boring, or they might it might be Rajasic for a while and might go back to boring down the road. I mean, they don't go into the spiritual that we're talking about. But it is saying, and the title, they use Hope Springs, as if hope can spring again. And I think that it's one. I don't think it's a great movie.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm very interested in it. Of course, it's my
yes.
field.
Yes.
It's not a great movie, but I think it might really do great things for people to say, hey, that's us, and maybe they'll use some of the teachings in it to move themselves to another level, and then maybe they'll be ready to come to an intimacy retreat. But we get people who come to this intimacy retreat who know nothing. They've not done yoga. They don't know about Kundalini. Some of them have. We get people who are yoga teachers. We get acupuncturists. We get gynecologists. We get people of all walks of life who come to our intimacy retreats. On the spiritual path, some of them are on a spiritual path, and some of them, a few, not so many, the couple itself is on a shared spiritual path.
Okay.
But most often, they're really mainstream, they've been exposed to perhaps yoga, they've been exposed to things of... some may have been exposed. Some of them are church-going. Mm-hmm. We get people who are very Christian. We've had Muslim couples. We can get religious couples. What they have in common is they love their partner, and someone at least in the relationship really understands that there can be a deeper level of connection. I mean, I've had couples say, well, our sex life is great, but we're missing the intimacy. Or I've had others that say, we haven't had sex in a year. So it can be all different types. And some of them just come because they want to learn about Tantra. So all
now, if
types.
someone wanted to, we're about 2 minutes, and we have only got 2 minutes left, I believe, before the show's over. So I want you to tell us how someone can contact you if they want to attend one of your intimacy retreats, or in any way are interested in what you do.
Well, if you're watching the show, you're online, go immediately to Intimacy Retreats. The word intimacy, INTIMACY, retreats, plural, all one word, intimacyretreats.com. Our phone number is there, our email, you can email us, you can call us. We're on Facebook, you can look for Intimacy Retreats on Facebook. You can friend us, you can like us. We try to be out there. You can look for our book. We have other products. We have a CD called Lessons in Intimacy that is an experience you can do at home.
Oh, yes.
That begins to invite you to tap into the beginnings of this kind of deep bond and spiritual connection that you can have with your partner. So
I think it's such valuable work that you do.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you very much for coming to the show. It's been an enlightening hour with you, and I want to thank everyone at home for joining us and stepping for at least a moment outside the box here at Beyond the Matrix. And until next week, may peace and love be your guide.